Welcome to SAM Conversation, an online program of South Asia Monitor. The topic before us today is on the Northeast insurgencies. In particular, the National Socialist Council of Nagaland, Isaac Muiva Group. It is my pleasure to welcome Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia, former Director General Military Operations, former Director of the Center for Joint Warfare Studies, an old, seasoned, very highly qualified paratrooper from the Special Forces. We have Lieutenant General Shokin Chauhan, former Director General of the Assam Rifles. He was, in earlier years, he was an attaché, defense attaché to Nepal, and he's also been part of the Ceasefire observation group. And finally, we have Brigadier Rahul Bhonsle, who heads security risks. It was in 1999 when I just left the service and begun my life as a freelance journalist on military and security affairs. And it was in 99, you can say after Kargil, sometime after Kargil, that Mr. Thungalung Muiva of the NSCN-IM group and his colleague Isaac Swu chose to come to Delhi, and we had a pleasant surprise of being told that they'd like to speak to the media. In the peace process had begun in 1997 when the country was celebrating 50 years of independence. It was, I'll say, a not very usual kind of a peace process, because this group, the NSCN-IM, continued to retain their arms. Anyhow, at the press conference, I made sure I reach well in time and get a nice seat in front. And when question hour began, I promptly asked Mr. Muiva, I said, what kind of peace process or peace talks are you part of? Because you retained all your arms. And there have been reports of they're being used also. Mr. Muiva shuddered into rage and said, a Naga is never without his arms. And Mr. K. Padmanabhaiah, who was accompanying them, he was trying to sort of discourage me to proceed further. But I conveyed to Mr. Muiva, I said, any peace process by any group of extremists who are armed begins once they lay down their arms. Anyhow, The other major development with the NSC and IM was that the nomenclature National Socialist Council of Nagaland became Nagalim. So Nagalim is a term which denotes that all Naga inhabited areas, this is what they are aspiring for. And this sparked off such bloody riots in Manipur that a very well-known theatre person, Ratan Thiam, who is probably one of the youngest awardees of the Padma Shri, he surrendered his Padma Shri. This was in 2001. Owing to, as he lamented, the government just being a silent observer to the violence that has rocked Manipur following the extension of the Naga ceasefire without territorial limits. Ever since then, Nagalim keeps popping up by various NSCN leaders. Then the worst ever development during the period, you can say, thereafter, which carried on till almost 2014, was the development of a Chinese connection, or you can say the renewal or revival of a Chinese connection, which became so strong that we had Anthony Shimre, no less than a nephew of Twingling Muiva, acting as almost an ambassador and being the go-between for a very large traffic of arms for the Northeast insurgents, that is a United Liberation Front of Assam Ulfa, PLA, not the Chinese PLA, but Manipur's underground group PLA, People's Liberation Army, and the KYKL, Kangli, Yawol, Kanaluk, a Meitei group, and even the left-wing insurgents. The NSC and IM, Anthony Shimre, he was captured by the police, and a lot of inputs came out. In recent years, incidents like assassinations, and very recent I'm referring to, assassination of a colonel and his family, and the firing by personnel of 21 security forces, 21 special forces on civilians in Nagaland, who did not stop when they should have at an army checkpoint and rushed on, are disturbing. I have raised the question of what the ISN and the Government of India peace process has amounted to. This was, after all, announced by no less than Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The 2015 framework agreement details have not been disclosed. There are also issues about a separate flag and passport for Nagaland or Nagalim. Their 8-point demands include separate constitution, a permanent representative in the United Nations, joint foreign affairs, Naga currency, pan-Naga government to cover all Naga inhabited areas in the northeastern region, in short, Nagalim. Gentlemen, I invite your comments. Let's start with Vinod Bhatia.
Sir, I think you have detailed the issues and the dynamics of Nagaland, I think exceedingly well, having known them. The issues are mostly India. We have known that it is the oldest insurgency in India. We also know that on the positive side, uh, the India was the second country in the world to resolve insurgency, which is the Mizo insurgency, 15th August 1985, after the Malay insurgency. There have been insurgencies resolved thereafter, Sri Lanka and Nepal closer home, the Irish insurgency, the Punjab militancy. But if you take the insurgencies of the Northeast, and there have been many reasons for that, I'll not go to the positive factors. But the situation today is one, I feel there are no insurgencies there. If you look at the violence figures, it is subcritical. It is not. It is in the law and order domain. It's not the public order domain. Actually, if you just look at it, and I've got the figures, sir, and these are indicators. If you look at Nagaland, in 2008, it was 79 incidents with 43 civilian casualties, 2 SF, 97 terrorists, public insurgents, and 144. And you come down to 2016, 5 incidents, 4 civilians, 2 terrorists, total 6. 17 is total 8, out of which 4 are terrorists and 3 civilians, 1 security personnel. And 2020, we have a figure of 2 incidents and 2 terrorists killed. 2, of course, this Churachandpur incident, I think, is a sad one. It's a one-off incident. So I feel similarly in Manipur, today the insurgency is really not there. But the fact is, the networks are intact, the insurgent groups are intact. They're, like you rightly said, they have the weapons with them right now. And there are undercurrents, there are interfactional crises.
And the tax collection is on also?
100% tax collection on a big way. That is, when they say GPRM, the government of the People's Republic of Nagaland, and they collect taxes, and taxes are paid. Shokin, Chauhan know better, but up to about 20% tax are paid to the various groups, and that is where Dimapur becomes the centrality for the tax collection, because domination of Dimapur, which is the real head for the northeast, not the north exactly, but Manipur, Nagaland, and beyond. So you find that anyone who dominates the tax collection in Dimapur would have an upper hand on others. That's why most of the interfactional conflicts, clashes take place in Dimapur. So I think in a very rudimentary way, let me just put it very bluntly, I think it's become an industry right now. Though I know Shokin Chauhan not agree, it's an industry. It's a commercial enterprise out there where everyone is gaining. The insurgent groups collects taxes. The government gets the central funds to keep. The people also think, and Nagaland people are very, very honest. Let me tell you that the Thais are very honest. But when it comes to central funds, they think the central funds are meant for the kitty. There is this mindset. So we have a situation where not so a commercial enterprise, where it's a win-win for everyone, the funds coming from the center, the funds being collected, people paying for the funds, and people getting the funds back. So it's a real mix sort of a thing going on. Violence levels are low. That's the point to be taken care of.
Thank
and
you.
The extreme position of Naga.
Thank you very much for your observations. I now request Lieutenant Shokin Chauhan. He's no stranger to the NSCN. The very first time when we met in Nagaland was when he was he was waiting for some transport, and I picked him up, and he looked at the belt I was wearing, and that's when we realized we're from the same school. Anyway, that was a time when his battalion, one of the 9 Gurkhas, they made some great achievements against NSC and IM. Lieutenant Chauhan, please.
Good evening, sir. Nice to be part of the group to discuss Nagaland, the NSC and IM, and if we go a little further, the other myriad insurgencies of the Northeast. it's always interesting because of the amount of information or disinformation that is actually floating around on what exactly is the situation, how we feel we must tackle them, and what is my view on this and where do I see the future. Let me just delve into a little history. This insurgency actually started in 1956 when the NFG, the Naga federal government, decided that they were not willing to now carry out any more negotiations with the government of India, or at that time the government of Assam, because the state of Nagaland did not exist. And it was government of Assam, the governor of Assam, who was actually carrying out the discussion, and decided to start an armed insurgency, which then resulted in the central government moving troops into Nagaland, and then finally bringing in the Act of 1958, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which is the much hated act in the Northeast. And from then on, it's been waning, going up and waning. And finally, not finally, but midway in between, in 1975, we had the Shillong Accord, where the Naga federal government surrendered to the government of India. Many of them laid down their arms, but it was Tronkalong Muiwa, along with Isaac Chisiswu, who did not agree with this, and they had about 200 plus cadres who was actually coming back from China, who had been trained in China, and who were outside Nagaland, living in Myanmar. That
sorry, Shokin, I will request you to come to the very crux.
I will.
Now,
but this is the crux. This is the crux. So I'll request you to just listen. So the issue was that why did the Shillong Accord fail? Were there enough safeguards? Were there enough situations? After all, an accord of the kind where the Prime Minister at that time was Indira Gandhi, and that failed. What are we doing now, and how are we sort of using that accord, and how are we using that background to go further? You've covered everything else, but there are a couple of issues that I thought I must clarify with you. We still don't have an idea of the number of cadres of the NSC and IM. I tried my best to try and get their numbers. I wanted to register all the armed cadre of the NSC and IM. I had started the process of giving them identity cards, but sometimes the government itself wants the situation to be nebulous and discouraged me from giving them cards because they thought that maybe it would legitimizing something. So the first issue is we don't know how many cadres they have. Second issue is we don't know how many weapons do they have. Third issue is that we don't know where their weapons are. Many of the weapons have been stored in caches inside Nagaland, outside Nagaland, in Myanmar, in camps in Myanmar, and it is unlikely that any surgical strike carried out on the on Hebron, which is the main camp of the headquarters of the NSC and IM, will result in any great idea of how many weapons you would be able to get or how many cadres you would be able to get. So the first issue is, let's rule out the issue of force. Second issue is that if we rule out the issue of force, then there is only the system that we should be able to talk and discuss this issue out and bring this to an end. What do the cadres think? I agree with General Vinod Bhatia. It's an industry. Many of the cadres earn money through this tax collection or extortion, as we call it. A lot of money goes to the leaders. Part of it goes to the cadre, and that's how the system is functioning. But who all are winning in this situation? All arms of the state government is winning. A lot of people are involved in the collection of this extortion tax. A lot of people are paying this tax. But the main issue that I'd like to ask you is that if this insurgency was so bad for the people, then why are the mothers and the fathers providing this insurgency with insurgents. I have been to many villages, as you know. I was posted in Ukhrul. I have been to Ukhrul many times. I've been to many villages in Nagaland. And when I asked the mothers and fathers sit down with the village, because I was the chairman of the ceasefire monitoring group and I could literally go anywhere, they are non-committal about the fact that why are their children going there? What do they hope to earn? What do they hope? So there is still a great deal of sympathy for the NSCNIM, a great deal of feeling that they will and they are fighting for their freedom and for their nation. So whatever you do, Anil sir, whatever be our own, finally we come to whatever conclusion we want. Be clear that this insurgency has the support of the people. If we push these people further, China will get involved. We need to negotiate. We need to negotiate from a position of strength, but at the same time, we need to negotiate from a position of knowledge, which I must confess, sir, is not prevalent in the leadership of the political leadership of the country. There's absolutely no idea of knowledge, no idea of the people, and I personally know all the insurgents you mentioned, Anthony. I have been to the house. He's been to my house. We're good friends. Atem, I've visited Atem's house too. I've visited Phungthing. I've visited Muiva. I know them personally, sir, and I know exactly how they feel. But the issue is that everything has to be done with an idea of knowledge, an idea of what makes them tick, and how do we get them to agree to an accord that suits both of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lieutenant Chauhan. Very profound observations. Now, Brigadier Bhonsle is one who has made some recent observations through his very, very incisive articles. At least two, I recall, in the recent month or so. Would you please come out with your observations and any other, any other point by way of recommendation?
Thank you very much, sir, for having me for this excellent discussion which we are having. It's a great honor and privilege to be along with the two very senior veterans of the Indian Army who have extensive experience of not only Nagaland, but overall in the Northeast as well as general issues per se. The way we look at, the way I look at the Naga insurgency, and I completely agree with my esteemed senior colleagues that the way their approach is, I think, absolutely dot on. One additional aspect which I would like to highlight is, firstly, this Naga insurgency is an ethnic nationalist insurgency. When you talk of an ethnic nationalist insurgency, it implies that they want a national identity to be very, very clear, and they want to highlight the same. Now, if you see what happened on 14th August this year, and it happens every year, all the Naga groups, and one of the factor, of course, is that Naga groups are so much divided amongst themselves that one can't even remember offhand how many are there. But nevertheless, NSC and IM continues to be the largest and the most significant. Now, 14th of August, all Naga groups celebrate their so-called their Independence Day. So when you want to absorb a particular community or a particular the entity which wants to have its own ethnic nationalist identity, one has to undertake certain I would say certain measures, or I would say even certain concessions, because after all, we want to sort of incorporate them in the national mainstream. And that is the primary demand of the NSCM-IM, is the flag and the constitution. Now, obviously, in India, you cannot have two flags and two constitutions. But we have had instances where Jammu and Kashmir has had a few years back a separate constitution and a separate the flag, which of course was subsumed by the Indian constitution. And I think that is exactly the type of arrangements the Naga, NSCM-IM is possibly looking at. I'm not saying I'm not privy to that. Because one aspect which got me into this was that when they were having the talks in New Delhi, I was in touch with some of the NSCM-IM top leadership, and it happened when Isaac Sue was, about on his last leg and etc. Now, after that, some of the people who are in top leadership, they in informal conversation, I would like to name them, they mentioned that the flag and constitution is only the insistence by the Muya, and it's not the insistence by other leaders. But today, as we know, the flag and constitution has become the primary issue on which the NSC and IM is not willing to move forward. So we don't know what is there in the 2015 the framework agreement, and they try to raise various issues that we have been betrayed, etc. Betrayal is, of course, a standard thing which the nationalists, any ethnic nationalist insurgency will go into, and we have to end. So the other aspect you highlighted is about the Chinese interest. Now, of course, the Chinese physical support and etc. may not be very significant at present, but I do believe that the Chinese have certain interest in not letting the Naga insurgency, the Naga insurgency problem getting resolved, because that would imply that many other insurgencies were already there in the Northeast will also be going into the same direction. So in some ways, the Chinese would be sort of having their interest in trying to sort of muddy the waters, I would say. I don't have much, we can't have solid proof for that, but intelligence operations we don't have. And the third factor is the Myanmar scenario. Now, as you know, the Myanmar presently is going through an acute sort of a civil war, I would say, particularly on the borders with India. There is a complete failure of the security apparatus. Now, some of the NSCN groups which are operating in that area, and there's Yongang and others are taking advantage of it. NSCN, I have also got the bases, etc. on the other side. So I think at present, unless we are willing to sort of resolve this issue of the flag and the constitution, I don't think NSCN is willing to come on board because of the factors which I stated. They feel they've got a strong hand, and that is the way I feel that whole thing is going to unravel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brigadier Bhonsle. We had some very important points that have been brought up. And the fact remains that if we are to maintain the integrity of the nation, it's taken us 70 years to correct what was wrong in Jammu and Kashmir. Because if there's any way that, a flag and even just a flag is granted to the NSCN, it's going to make our position very, very weak. And as it is, since the abrogation of 370, the kind of movement that has begun against the present government, which is not only, creating a lot of disturbance within the country, coming from outside also, positively with outside help from at least two nations which are very inimical to us. I can only, one can only hope for, some more, persuasive skills that we use, and like General Chauhan, I think it would be probably the army, keeping the army involved would be a good option in trying to, bring the Nagas back, the NSC and IM back into the fold. I cannot say that all families in Nagaland support them, because in time that one spent in the Northeast, there there was like, and also as brought out by some of you, there's quite a bit of disunity. There's, the NSC and IM is a group which is headed by Tangkhuls. Tangkhuls are from Ukrul. They're not even from Nagaland, I think we have to play our cards. The government has to play its cards in such a way that all can be brought onto one platform and say, well, here's Nagaland and let it get going. Mizoram is one great example of a very, very fierce insurgency which got resolved. And I think I give Mizo the credit as being out of the most intelligent of the northeastern tribes. Anyway, thank you very much, gentlemen, for all your inputs. All the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you much.
Thank you, sir.